Jack the Ripper, the mysterious serial killer whose identity has long remained a mystery. That is, until now. For over 130 years, Jack the Ripper has haunted history, a name etched in blood across the alleys of Victorian London. But in 2025, a bombshell claim rocked the world. Experts say they've finally solved the case. DNA evidence, historical records, and forensic analysis point to one man, Aaron Kosminski, a troubled Polish barber with a shadowy past. But is this really the end of the mystery, or the beginning of a new controversy? In this video, we break down the shocking new findings, the critics fighting back, and why the answer may be more disturbing than the mystery itself, the slayings that shook Victorian London. In the fall of 1888, the narrow alleys of Whitechapel, a grimy district in East London, became the stage for one of the most chilling slaying sprees in history. The victims were 5 women, all brutally slain in the dead of night. Their names, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, are now etched in infamy, known collectively as the Canonical Five. Each was mutilated with surgical precision, some with organs removed, their deaths carrying the unmistakable signature of a slayer who wasn't just violent, but disturbingly calculated. Victorian London was already a place of great contrast, towering wealth on one side, festering poverty on the other. And nowhere was this divide more brutal than in Whitechapel, where overcrowding, crime, disease, and desperation turned every corner into a survival test. In this landscape of broken cobblestones and flickering gas lamps, the slayings struck like a hammer. These were not crimes of opportunity. The precision, the escalating violence, and the geographic proximity of the slayers suggested something methodical. This wasn't a madman losing control. This was a predator perfecting a routine. The public and media reacted with sheer panic. The press, hungry for readers, amplified the horror. Newspapers splashed lurid headlines across front pages and gave the slayer a name that would become legend: Jack the Ripper. The name came from a series of taunting letters allegedly sent by the slayer himself to the police and newspapers. Some of these, like the infamous From Hell letter, arrived with gruesome tokens such as a portion of a human kidney. The authenticity of the letters remains debated, but the psychological impact was immediate and massive. Fear gripped the city, and hysteria spread faster than fact. They were very good at scrambling the police. Hundreds of officers patrolled the streets. In their hauling, suspects had to face searching inquiries. Consulted where doctors, spun were theories, and circulated were sketches of a tall man in a top hat or some cloaked figure in the shadows. But nothing came of it. No one was arrested, no one was charged. Again by the front, after dozens of interviews, stakeouts, and frantic appeals for the media, the slayer slipped from the net. The Ripper not only slayed, but also sent the police into a frenzy of activity and excitement, mocked the public, and revealed to the rest of the world just how vulnerable the most powerful empire in the world was right in the capital city. Even Queen Victoria expressed annoyance and urged the Home Secretary to expedite matters. Yet after the last slaying, Mary Jane Kelly, who was so terribly mutilated that even hardened officers were shaken, the slaying stopped abruptly. No more bodies, no more letters, just silence. And in that silence, the myth was born. Here is still an indelible image of Jack the Ripper. Not so much a serial slayer as a shadow bleeding out a statement in civilization that monsters do exist. Over time, the case became a mirror reflecting society's darkest fears: poverty, misogyny, mental illness, and institutional failure. The unanswered question has haunted generations. Who was he? How did he disappear? And why couldn't the world's greatest empire catch him? Little did the public know the police had quietly suspected someone all along, a man hiding in plain sight. But it would take more than a century and a single blood-stained artifact to bring his name back into the spotlight: the barber in the fog. If you were walking through Whitechapel in the late 1880s, It's entirely possible you passed Aaron Kosminski. He might have been standing quietly outside a barbershop, scissors in hand, blending seamlessly into the gray London mist. To most, he was just another face in the crowd, a Polish immigrant trying to survive in a hostile city. But to a handful of Scotland Yard investigators, he was a looming shadow, a man of deep suspicion. And in 2025, he would be named the most likely candidate to be Jack the Ripper. Aaron Kosminski was born in 1865 in Klotowa, Poland. Like many Jews of his generation, he fled anti-Semitic violence and persecution in Eastern Europe, arriving in London in the early 1880s. He settled in Whitechapel, where poverty and tension were a way of life. The immigrant community in this overcrowded district was both a scapegoat and a victim. Kosminski, by all available records, worked as a barber, a profession requiring precision with a blade, an ironic and disturbing detail in hindsight. What makes Kosminski stand out isn't just proximity, it's the psychological profile that emerged over time. He lived within walking distance of all the slaying sites. His behavior was increasingly erratic, and in a secret memorandum written in 1894, Sir Melville Macnaghten, an assistant chief constable at Scotland Yard, listed Kosminski as one of 3 key suspects. The note described him as having a great hatred of women with strong homicidal tendencies. That's not hearsay. That's from the inner circle of the investigation itself. Despite their suspicions, police never arrested him. They lacked hard evidence, no fingerprints, no blood analysis, no surveillance footage. It was a different world. Even though some officers reportedly identified Kosminski in a secret lineup, the witness refused to testify, fearing it would place another Jew in danger during a time of rising anti-Semitic fervor. The case stagnated. Kosminski's mental condition deteriorated very rapidly over the next few years, and by 1891, he was locked up after having hallucinations of a violent nature and threatening his sister with a knife. His ultimate destination was the Colney Hatch Asylum, with records of severe delusions, auditory hallucinations, and religious mania. He stopped bathing. He spoke in fragmented thoughts, was never released, and died from gangrene in 1919 while still locked up. A tragic end. But was it also the quiet silencing of a serial slayer? One of the many unnerving aspects of Kosminski that gets discussed amongst historians is the very vocation that he held. Barbers in the Victorian era were hardly just stylists. Many performed minor surgical procedures, from bloodletting to tooth extraction to wound treatment. It would have made sense that Kosminski would have known how to wield a blade with biological precision. Although he may never have received any formal training, he certainly did not need it in the streetwise, gritty style of that Victorian life. His vocation could have afforded him just enough skill to inflict the gruesome mutilations depicted in the Ripper cases. In the year 2014, more than a century after the slayings, the breakthrough was hailed more than expected. Traces of DNA were reported to have been recovered from a shawl, supposedly from one of the Ripper crime scenes. And by 2019, it was reported that DNA from that shawl matched the maternal line of Aaron Kosminski. Fast forward to 2025, when the case against him seemed stronger than ever. Yet every inch of his story carries doubt. Could a mentally disturbed barber really elude the most vigorous manhunt in British history? The real twist, however, would come not from who Kosminski was, but from what he may have left behind at the crime scene. A simple piece of fabric forgotten for decades would soon take center stage. The shawl that changed everything. For over a century, the Jack the Ripper case was little more than rumors, sketches, and dead-end theories. Then came a breakthrough in 2025, not with a weapon or confession, but with something surprisingly ordinary, a shawl. Worn, stained, and steeped in mystery, this piece of cloth became the center of the most dramatic turn yet in the infamous case. The shawl is said to have been found near Catherine Eddowes, the Ripper's 4th known victim, brutally slain on September 30th, 1888. According to family lore, Sergeant Amos Simpson retrieved the silk and wool shawl from the crime scene, intending to gift it to his wife. She refused, and the shawl was tucked away, eventually passed down as a grim heirloom. In 2007, the shawl resurfaced at auction and was purchased by author Russell Edwards. Where others saw a morbid relic, Edwards saw potential evidence. He believed the shawl could still hold forensic traces from the night of Edow's slaying and turned to Dr. Jari Louhelainen, a molecular biologist, for testing. Using modern tools, ultraviolet light microscopy, and spectrophotometry, Louhelainen identified blood traces that appeared consistent with Edow's medical history, including symptoms of Bright's disease, a kidney condition she was known to have. That alone suggested the shawl might have been at the crime scene, but the real shock came from semen stains found on the cloth. Louhelainen extracted mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, and compared it to a living descendant of Aaron Kosminski's sister. According to Edwards and Louhelainen, the match was exact. They declared the shawl held the DNA of both victim and slayer, identifying Kosminski as Jack the Ripper. In 2019, the results were published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences. By 2025, the case reignited globally. Edwards released Jack the Ripper, the definitive casebook, gave interviews, and appeared on TV shows like Today Australia, proclaiming the mystery solved. Massive public uproar. Headlines screamed Jack the Ripper identified, letting social media echo with excitement and disbelief. This was touted as a historic find by true crime enthusiasts. Scientists and skeptics had other opinions. The first red flag chain of custody. The shroud remained mysterious for the next 1888 years until the 21st century. No police record confirms its place in the scene of the crime. Is it safe for a sergeant to take blood-soaked clothing as an ornament in their private collection? One would think otherwise. Then came doubts about mitochondrial DNA itself. While nuclear DNA can uniquely identify a person, mtDNA shares genetic material with the maternal family. And so in a crowd of thousands, if not millions of unrelated people, such as in the East London area of the 1880s, one doesn't have to match a perfect DNA string to prove guilt. Then contamination comes into the fray. With the passage of over 137 years, this shawl has changed many hands. Families, auctioneers, historians, collectors, any of whom might have left behind some DNA residue. And still worse, an expression of concern regarding this study was as late as the year 2024 by the Journal of Forensic Sciences because of a demand for missing raw data and trust issues, thereby rendering replication impossible. Edwards continued to hold on. He maintained that the shawl was preserved in controlled conditions and that advanced techniques would reduce the possibility of error still further. The results were not just compelling. As far as he was concerned, they were conclusive. Anyhow, the shawl became more than just an artifact. It has become a symbol, a tenuous link between the violent and brutal events of a Victorian past and the tools of modern science. It brought us nearer to the answer, but also made the debate more profound. And the story is far from over. In the next chapter, we'll explore the science behind the DNA test and why experts remain sharply divided over what it really proves, DNA and a divided scientific world. For a moment, it seemed like the Jack the Ripper mystery had finally been solved. A shawl, a DNA test, a reputable scientist, and a suspect with a dark past. What more could anyone ask for? But after the 2019 forensic revelation naming Aaron Kosminski as the Ripper, skepticism quickly followed. By 2025, the case once thought closed had reopened under a new kind of scrutiny from the scientific world itself. At the center of the controversy is mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, extracted from a blood-stained shawl allegedly found near the victim, Catherine Eddowes. Unlike nuclear DNA, mtDNA is inherited maternally and shared among thousands. In the dense, immigrant-heavy population of the 1880s, Whitechapel, that means the match to Kosminski, only confirms that someone from his maternal line was present, not necessarily him. The shawl's provenance further weakens the case. It wasn't recorded in 1888 police files and remained in private hands for over a century, allegedly passed down through a police officer's family. No documentation proves it was ever at the crime scene. That lack of forensic chain of custody casts serious doubt on its credibility. Renowned geneticists raised alarms. Dr. Turi King, famous for identifying Richard III's remains, called the shawl's origins anecdotal and emphasized that without a verified chain of custody or contamination controls, the findings are compromised. Walter Parson, a leading forensic scientist, dismissed the study as unpublishable nonsense, criticizing the lack of raw data and transparency. In 2024, the Journal of Forensic Sciences, which originally published the study, issued an official expression of concern. The reason key data was missing and the results couldn't be replicated. In science, reproducibility is vital. Without it, the findings don't hold. The scientist behind the analysis, Dr. Jari Luhalainen, has also come under fire. While respected in his field, he refused to release the full DNA sequences or detailed methodology. Critics accuse him of confirmation bias, especially given his collaboration with Russell Edwards, the author and owner of the shawl, who has a personal and commercial stake in the Kosminski theory. And with time, even further doubt started looming over the shawl's possession. Reports suggest that it was touched by many without any protective gear. Forensic experts are saying that these conditions are ripe for contamination. This is a nightmare when trying to extract reliable DNA. It becomes almost impossible to isolate a single genetic profile from a mixture of modern and historical contacts. Even the alleged matching from Kosminski's living relatives is not completely airtight. Critics note that mtDNA matches are not unique, as many individuals within the same ethnic background or family may share the same profile. This greatly reduces the specificity of the test in a community such as the 1880s East End of London. But still, the supporters of the findings stick to it. Edwards insists that the case is solved, and Luhalainen claims the methods were verifiable and very modern. They argue that when combined with historical records and psychological profiling, DNA creates a compelling argument. Public opinion is vastly polarized. Some regard the shawl as the answer to the mystery. Others declare that it is an exercise in pseudoscience dressed in sensationalism. Even high-profile outlets such as Forbes, New Scientist, and Science published harsh rebuttals against it. The very title Jack the Ripper claim, dubbed unpublishable nonsense, gave way to further skepticism. So what does this leave in 2025 midway for one of the most controversial breakthroughs in true crime history? What used to be considered definitive proof has turned into a battleground for scientists, historians, and the public at large. For every expert defending the findings, another expert is questioning the method's ethics or logic behind them. And as forensic doubt grows, interest in other suspects has reignited. If Kosminski isn't the Ripper, then who is? If he is, why did it take a disputed shawl to prove it? The science may have stirred up answers, but it's also unearthed new questions. A 2025 push for justice and closure. In 2025, the Jack the Ripper case burst out of history books and into headlines. With Aaron Kosminski now publicly named as the likely slayer, what was once a cold, unsolved mystery became a renewed call for justice. But this time it wasn't just about theories or DNA. It was about people, real families, real grief, and for some, the hope of closure after 137 years. Leading the charge were the descendants of Catherine Eddowes, the Ripper's fourth known victim. When DNA evidence allegedly linked Kosminski to a shawl found at her crime scene, her great-great-grandchildren stepped forward. They called for a formal inquest, not seeking punishment, but recognition. "We don't want revenge," one said in a widely shared CBS interview. "We just want the truth to be said out loud." That quote went viral, transforming a forensic discovery into a human story of generational pain. Their appeal resonated across media and social platforms. Russell Edwards, the historian and owner of the infamous shawl, used the momentum to promote the findings. Appearing on book tours, podcasts, and international programs like Today Australia, Edwards described the DNA match as not only a scientific triumph, but a moral one, offering justice to victims long forgotten by the legal system. Online forums and social media lit up. Hashtags like #JackTheRipper identified and #Kosminski confirmed trended for weeks. Supporters posted messages celebrating long-awaited answers. "My grandma told me this story when I was a kid. I never thought I'd see the day." Skeptics pushed back. "This feels rushed. We're building closure on shaky ground." Mainstream media seized the moment. Newsweek ran a headline: "Jack the Ripper named families demand recognition." GB News aired specials, and Netflix began developing a new docu-series, this time promising a focus on victims' families instead of the Slayer's legend. In the place named Whitechapel, which witnessed the actual toll of the slayings, local heads debated on the actions to take. This area today teems with Ripper tours and gift shops in the face of the historical haunting it possesses. Some tour guides began introducing the Kosminski celebrity in their scripts, but for others it was still a murky area, like they were waiting for the debate to be settled first before they would name names in their tours. Some of the ancestors were also caught in the flack. A few appeared in interviews expressing some levels of confusion, misery, or quiet acceptance. One said, "If it is true, I suppose we have to accept it. But I can't change what someone did over a century ago." Others denied commenting, preferring not to shoulder the burden of an ancestor's crime or those of his ancestry. In legal terms, it would be hard to prove in a court of law. The UK does not open old cases like this except when new and convincing evidence is found and none of the suspects are even alive. But the supporters of this inquest say it is really symbolic. What they are after is not punishment. Rather, they want a formal acknowledgement, a historical correction that will endorse the pain that their families have suffered. Still, critics caution against rushing into naming a slayer based on one piece of DNA evidence that is hardly uncontested, since that could set a poor precedent. They caution against rewriting history to fit emotional narratives, but advocates counter that silence and ambiguity will do more harm. Naming the slayer, they argue, does not eliminate mystery. It shall restore dignity to the victims who were swallowed in it. By the middle of 2025, a petition gained traction that would demand official recognition from Parliament of Kosminski as the most probable perpetrator. Tens of thousands signed the petition within days. Whether this will prompt any official action remains to be seen, but the momentum is showing no signs of abating. But is Kosminski truly the man behind the myth? Or are there others still waiting in the shadows? The next chapter explores the other suspects who continue to haunt this enduring mystery. Other suspects' forgotten shadows. Even as Aaron Kosminski reclaims headlines in 2025, one fact persists. He wasn't the only suspect. Far from it. Since 1888, the Jack the Ripper case has attracted a long line of potential culprits, some frightening, others tragic, and many bordering on the bizarre. If anything, the mystery has thrived not on resolution, but on obsession. For every argument naming Kosminski the slayer, there's another pointing elsewhere. One early suspect was Montague John Druitt, a barrister and schoolteacher whose apparent death in the Thames occurred just weeks after the last canonical slaying. The timing was eerie enough that police considered him a serious suspect. Years later, senior officer Sir Melville Macnaghten named Druitt in a confidential memo citing family suspicions and labeling him indecently insane. But there was no hard evidence. No confession, no forensics, just timing and speculation. A troubled man lost to history, not a proven slayer. Then there's Michael Ostrog, a Russian-born criminal with a long, violent history. His psychiatric issues and transient lifestyle made him a suspect, but the case fell apart under scrutiny. He may not have even been in London during the slayings, and his crimes, mainly theft and fraud, didn't match the Ripper's horrific brutality. Perhaps the most disturbing alternative was Francis Tumblety, an American quack doctor who openly despised women, especially sex workers. He was in London during the slayings and was arrested for unrelated charges. His known collection of preserved uteruses adds a chilling layer, one that echoes the Ripper's gruesome organ removals. Tumblety fled to the US soon after his arrest, prompting speculation that his escape wasn't coincidental. Yet, like the others, no conclusive evidence linked him to the crimes. Other suspects include James Maybrick, whose diary confession is widely regarded as a hoax; Walter Sickert, the eccentric artist singled out by author Patricia Cornwell; and Prince Albert Victor, the Queen's grandson, who sits at the center of elaborate royal conspiracy theories. All have had their moment in the spotlight, and all remain unproven. The DNA evidence is what makes Kosminski stand out in 2T25. No other suspect has that. Coupled with his known mental illness institutionalization and proximity to the crime scenes, he makes the most solvable figure. But experts warn that this opens itself to confirmation bias, the tendency to make evidence fit a preferred narrative rather than question the evidence. Once the theory seems complete, it is easy to stop asking whether it is really so. Another layer of complication: some of the Ripper slayings may have been committed by different slayers. Stride, for example, was not mutilated as severely as were the other victims. This has led some theorists to suggest not only that a second slayer was involved, but also that some slayings may not have been connected. If this is the case, perhaps more than one man haunts these crimes. Buried under a singular myth, he might not have committed all the slayings. Even by present estimates, Ripperologists remain sharply split. Some hail the 2T25 disclosures as the trump card to end all trump cards. Others are still skeptical, sensing a trend toward shaping the suspects to fit a narrative instead of discovering newer facts. A third viewpoint maintains that we will never truly know the truth anyway. If it was ever there to begin with, it is probably gone forever, now lost in tampered and compromised outdated records and mythologized history. In the end, the various candidates marketed here, Druitt, Tumblety, Ostrog, and others, are not names in an archive. They stand for the fears, biases, and uncertainties of their day, as well as our own. They are shadows at the periphery of a mystery that refuses to die. So if the DNA is disputed, and no other suspect holds, where does that leave us? As the world debates Jack the Ripper's identity in an age of hyperconnectivity and skepticism, the final question becomes, what does it mean if we've named him? And what if we haven't? The danger of a wrong answer. Despite headlines, DNA analysis, and confident declarations, one question remains. What if they're wrong? What if Aaron Kosminski wasn't Jack the Ripper? In 2025, many claim the case is finally closed. But beneath that certainty lies doubt among scientists, historians, and the public. Because solving a mystery this iconic after nearly 140 years isn't just a historical act. It carries deep cultural and human consequences if proven wrong. The case against Kosminski hinges on one item: a shawl allegedly found at the scene of Catherine Eddowes' slaying. Mitochondrial DNA on the fabric was matched to a living relative of Kosminski's. But this evidence has serious issues. For starters, the shawl's origins are murky. It was never officially logged by police in 1888. Its connection to the crime is based more on family legend than forensic record. If it wasn't really at the crime scene or was contaminated, then the entire case falls apart. Even the science behind DNA isn't airtight. Mitochondrial DNA isn't unique like a fingerprint. It simply links individuals through maternal ancestry. In 19th century Whitechapel, many people might have shared similar markers. So while it might sound definitive to the public in scientific or legal terms, the match is far from conclusive. And it only ties Kosminski to one victim, Eddowes. The other four canonical victims, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, and Mary Jane Kelly, have no direct forensic link to him. The assumption that all 5 slayings were committed by one person is still debated. Some experts argue that differences in timing, method, and escalation suggest multiple slayers. If so, Kosminski might not even be guilty of that one. Misidentifying the Ripper isn't just an academic mistake. It raises serious ethical concerns. Kosminski was mentally ill and institutionalized. Branding him a serial slayer without indisputable evidence risks vilifying someone who may have simply been vulnerable, not violent. It's a dangerous precedent, one where history condemns the defenseless. The descendants of Kosminski and the victims have themselves preferred to speak out for closure or a verdict. If the conclusion turns out to be erroneous, the pain becomes an innocent ingredient of collateral damage. Closure obtained precariously cannot be true closure. It is weak and most probably flawed. There is also a larger cultural risk. Jack the Ripper is not merely a historic personage. Rather, he is a myth, a reflection of fears, prejudices, and societal shortcomings. Resolving the mystery changes that narrative. If the resolution is incorrect, public confidence takes a hit in forensic science, historical research, and truth-seeking itself. It means that evidence can be twisted and conclusions rushed just to satisfy curiosity. Russell Edwards, the main proponent of the Kosminski theory, now faces the risk of a considerable hit to his credibility if it collapses. His drive and belief are obvious, but that misguides passion without peer-reviewed rigor, especially in the rewriting of history. That is a warning tale about the dangers of premature certainty. The crucial question then arises: do we really need an answer? Part of the eternal power of the Ripper lies with his anonymity. Giving him a name does not erase the poverty, the fear, the misogyny, and the neglect that allowed him to operate. It brings no justice to the women slain or healing to their communities. It simply imposes a false resolution upon us. History is not pristine, nor does it conform to convenience. It resists ideal endpoints. And when we impose one, we tend to distort the truth. So what if they are wrong? Then it will remain just that. A shadow stretching from Victorian streets to modern headlines. The mystery of Jack the Ripper has always been about more than just identity. It's about fear, obsession, and the dark side of human nature. Was Aaron Kosminski truly the man behind the mask? Let us know what you believe in the comments. Do you think the mystery is finally solved? Or are we still chasing shadows? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch our next video for more chilling mysteries, twisted histories, and truth hiding in plain sight.